The Federal Treasurer painting a rosy picture of the budget position despite slipping back into deficit after a few years or 2 years of surplus. Not everyone is convinced by his words. Economist Leith Van Onselen is the chief economist at macrobusiness.com.au. He's got some experience in the field, I think it's safe to say, previously working with the Australian Treasury, Victorian Treasury and Goldman Sachs. Leith, good afternoon to you.
Yeah, g'day Joel, how are you?
I'm doing okay. A lot happening, and the Treasurer's speaking on multiple fronts today, one of them being, of course, the unfolding situation in Vanuatu, but, of course, in his role of Treasurer, offering a take on the economic outlook, and he was pretty keen to point out budget improvements in comparison to that achieved by the previous government. I just ask you first, has Jim Chamers done a good job with the budget in your view?
Look, I'll be quite honest. Generally speaking, when it comes to federal governments, it's based a lot on luck and circumstance rather than what they've actually done. Now, the reason why I say that is when the Albanese government came to office, they were basically blessed with a lot of very good budget news. So what happened was the budget balance got revised up by $384 billion over the forward estimates. So they basically got a windfall of basically a third of $1 trillion. And that came about through three factors. So when Russia invaded Ukraine in early 2022, what it did is it drove up the global commodity prices. So pretty much everything Australia sells to the rest of the world. We're talking iron ore, coal, natural gas, all those sorts of things rocketed in value. And what that meant is that the federal government then got a massive windfall in mining company tax receipts. And then also we had double the immigration. We had twice as much immigration as the federal government projected. So in its first mini budget in October 2022, it projected that we'd get 470,000 net overseas migrants over 2 years. Instead, we got about 1 million. And what that did was that then massively increased personal income tax receipts because the migrants that came in work and then they pay personal income taxes to the federal government. All the costs most of the costs of migration then fall on the state governments, which obviously the federal government doesn't pay for. And then we also had a higher than expected inflation. And what that did was then that increased personal income tax receipts through bracket creep. So everyone's wages got adjusted to a varying degree because of the high inflation. And then that led to higher income tax receipts from the federal government. Now, when you add those three things up, they got an extra $384 billion that wasn't expected. And that is the underlying reason why the federal budget was in a greater position than the previous government. It was based on good luck, essentially.
So this deficit, how long do you think it's going to last?
Well, it's actually forecast to last for 10 years. So the actual forecast for the deficit is that we're going to be in deficit for the next 10 years. And that's to be expected because those three factors that I just mentioned are all reversing now. So we've now got falling commodity prices. So that little commodity price boom that we had after the Russia invaded Ukraine is now coming off, which means less company tax receipts. Immigration, although it's still very high, is falling. That means less growth in personal income tax receipts. And then we've also got falling inflation, which means less bracket creep. So those three things that pushed up all this extra money into the budget is reversing, and at the same time as the federal government faces, huge costs with things like the NDIS, which currently costs about $50 billion per annum and is projected to grow to $100 billion per annum in a decade's time. So it's not a great picture for the federal budget.
Leith Van Onselen, economist, chief economist at macrobusiness.com.au, ABC Radio. Summer afternoons. My name's Joel Spradborough. So what do we need to do about these? You've outlined some of the challenges we've faced and the situations we've found ourselves in. What needs to happen to pull out of it?
Yeah, so the federal budget's structurally in a bit of a pickle because it's heavily reliant on personal income taxes and company taxes. And the problem with that is on the personal income tax side, which is the biggest component, we've got an ageing population. So what that means is we've got proportionally less workers in the economy as the population ages, and we're taxing those people more and more. What we really need to do is broaden the tax base, and we should revisit the 2010 Henry Tax Review and basically broaden the tax base by increasing consumption taxes on resources. We don't tax our resources nearly enough and things like that to basically shift the burden away from taxing personal income taxes to individuals and relying on company taxes to be relying on these other areas. And that would generate more tax revenue and it would also bolster the budget.
Leith Van Onselen, I appreciate your time and your thoughts on the economic outlook. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries, Joel. Anytime.
There you go. Happy holidays, Leith Van Onselen. Some insights into the economic outlook issued by the Treasurer, slipping into deficit after 2 years of surplus.